14 years after the destruction of Solomon's temple, the Jewish exiles in Babylon received a message from God through the prophet Ezekiel. It came as a picture, a vision of how to construct a new temple when God brought them back to Israel from captivity. But first God reminded the people of why Jerusalem with its temple had been destroyed and why the people had been taken into exile. Here is the rather strange charge from Ezekiel 43, verse 8. God says, "They placed their threshold next to my threshold and their doorpost beside my doorpost, with only a wall between me and them. They defiled my holy name by their detestable practices, so I destroyed them in my anger." What's all this talk about doorposts? Well, in the last few decades of the kingdom of Judah, some of their kings actually built shrines to foreign gods within the courtyard of Yahweh's temple. So the doors and doorposts of these shrines were right next to the doorposts and doors leading into the Holy of Holies, where God had promised to dwell among the Israelites. Holy means set apart for special use. It was bad enough that the Jews worshipped other gods, but to do so within the temple courts showed utter contempt for the holiness of God's name, for the holiness of his reputation. Back to Ezekiel's plan for the new temple. The actual temple where God's glory was to reside was to be quite small, 172 feet square. But that was to set in the center of the Temple Mount, where only the priests were allowed. That was to be an area of almost 17 acres. And then all of that was to be surrounded by a holy precinct, land dedicated to God and his service. That area was to be a staggering 53 square miles. God's message? I am holy. Keep your distance. But when Jesus died on the cross, Luke 23:45 tells us that the curtain of the temple was torn in two. No more would man be separated from God. The grace of God poured out through the sacrifice of his Son, Jesus Christ. It made a way for us to approach the holy God. Hebrews 4:15 and 16. In fact, God now dwells directly in and among his people through the Holy Spirit. That's wonderful news. But since God is no less holy, how should the knowledge of his constant presence affect our daily lives?